3 weeks had passed since the shocking arrest that shook the city of Lagos. Golden Palm Kitchen was closed now. Its once busy table sat empty, the chairs stacked quietly in the corner. The bright yellow sign outside had begun to fade under the harsh Nigerian sun. For most people, the story was over. The newspapers had already moved on to new scandals and new tragedies. The television channels no longer talked about the mysterious poisonings. And Samuel Adeyemi, the quiet waiter who had poisoned several people connected to an old hit-and-run case, was now sitting behind thick concrete walls in Kirikiri prison. Justice, it seemed, had been served. But journalist Aisha Bello couldn't shake the feeling that something about the case was unfinished. The final days of the investigation had been rushed. Police had closed the case quickly after Samuel confessed to poisoning those he believed were responsible for helping a killer walk free. To everyone else, the story made perfect sense. A grieving brother. A revenge plan. A trail of poisoned victims. But to Aisha, there were still pieces that didn't fit. On a humid Thursday evening, as Lagos traffic hummed endlessly outside her apartment window, Aisha sat at her desk reviewing her old notes from the case. Stacks of papers covered the table. Police reports, witness statements, court transcripts, everything connected to the old hit-and-run accident that had killed Samuel's younger brother, Michael. According to official records, the driver responsible had been Dr. Victor Balogun, a wealthy businessman who had claimed the accident was unavoidable. Several witnesses had supported his story in court. Their testimonies had helped him avoid prison. Those same witnesses later became Samuel's victims. At least, that's what the record said. Aisha leaned back in her chair and rubbed her tired eyes. Something still felt wrong. Just then, her phone buzzed quietly on the table. A new message appeared on the screen. Unknown number. No profile picture. No previous messages. Just 6 simple words. The wrong people paid for it. Aisha's heart skipped a beat. She stared at the screen, reading the sentence again and again. The wrong people paid for it. Her mind immediately returned to Samuel's revenge. Had he poisoned the wrong people? Had the witnesses been innocent? Or worse, had someone manipulated the entire case? A second message appeared. This time, it contained only a single location. A quiet parking lot near the Lagos harbor. And a time. 10:30 p.m. Aisha looked at the clock on the wall. It was already 9:58. For a moment, she considered ignoring the message. It could be a prank, or someone trying to scare her. But her instincts as a journalist told her otherwise. This message was connected to the case. And if someone was telling the truth, then the story of Samuel Adeyemi might be far more complicated than anyone realized. Aisha grabbed her keys, slipped her phone into her bag, and headed toward the door. Outside, the humid Lagos night wrapped around the city like a heavy blanket. Traffic lights flickered in the distance. Street vendors packed up their stalls. And somewhere in the darkness, someone was waiting to reveal a secret that could change the entire story. The parking lot near the Lagos harbor was nearly empty when Aisha arrived. A single streetlight flickered weakly above the cracked asphalt, casting long shadows across the ground. In the distance, the sound of cargo ships echoed softly across the water. Aisha stepped out of her car and looked around cautiously. For a moment, she thought no one had come. Then she noticed a man standing near the far edge of the lot. He looked nervous. His shoulders were hunched, and he kept glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone to follow him. As Aisha approached, the man stepped forward into the dim light. He appeared to be in his late 40s, with tired eyes and a neatly pressed shirt that suggested he had once worked in an office. "You're Aisha Bello," he asked quietly. Aisha nodded. And you sent the message? The man hesitated. Yes. My name is Connor Adinka. Why did you contact me? Aisha asked. Connor wiped sweat from his forehead. Because what happened in that restaurant shouldn't have happened. Aisha crossed her arms. Then start talking. Connor looked around once more before lowering his voice. I used to work at the Lagos High Court. Aisha's attention sharpened immediately. What does that have to do with Samuel's case? Connor swallowed nervously. I was a records clerk during the trial of Dr. Victor Balogun. Aisha felt a chill run through her body. That was years ago, she said. Yes, Connor replied. But after the trial ended, something strange happened. What? Connor leaned closer. The witness list was changed. Aisha stared at him in disbelief. That's impossible, she said. Court records can't just be changed. Connor gave a weak laugh. They can, if the right person is paying for it. Aisha's mind raced. Are you saying the witnesses Samuel targeted were not the real witnesses? Connor nodded slowly. Some of them were never involved in the case at all. The words hung in the air between them. Samuel had believed he was punishing the people responsible for helping a killer walk free. But if the witness list had been altered, then Samuel may have killed innocent people. And someone powerful had made sure of it. Aisha's voice trembled slightly as she asked the question forming in her mind. Who changed the records? Connor looked at her with fear in his eyes. There was only one person who had the power and the money to do it. Aisha already knew the answer before he spoke. Connor whispered the name. Dr. Victor Balogun. The next morning, the sky over Lagos was still grey when Aisha Bello arrived outside Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison. The massive concrete walls rose high above the road, topped with rusted barbed wire that curled like thorns against the cloudy sky. Armed guards stood near the entrance, their expressions blank as they watched visitors enter through the heavy iron gates. Aisha showed her identification and signed the visitor log. After several security checks, a guard escorted her through a long hallway that smelled faintly of disinfectant and damp concrete. The sound of metal doors slamming echoed through the corridors. Finally, the guard stopped outside a small interview room. Wait here, he said. Aisha nodded and sat at the cold metal table inside the room. A single flickering light hung from the ceiling, casting dull shadows against the pale walls. A few minutes later, the door opened again. Samuel Adeyemi was brought inside by another guard. He wore a faded grey prison uniform now, and the confident posture he once carried as a restaurant waiter had faded slightly. He looked thinner than before, his face sharper, his eyes tired. But there was still something calm about him. Something controlled. Samuel sat down slowly across from Aisha. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Aisha reached into her bag and placed her phone on the table between them. You need to see this, she said quietly. Samuel glanced down at the screen. The message was still there. The wrong people paid for it. He read the sentence twice. Then his jaw tightened. That's not true, he said firmly, pushing the phone slightly away. I made sure every victim was connected to the trial. His voice carried the same certainty he had shown during his confession weeks earlier. But Aisha didn't move the phone. Instead, she leaned forward slightly. No, Samuel, she said calmly. Someone changed the records. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Samuel's face. His eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Aisha took a slow breath before answering. Last night I met a man named Connor Adinka. He used to work as a records clerk at the Lagos High Court during the trial of Dr. Victor Balogun. Samoa remained silent, listening. Aisha continued. He told me that after the trial ended, several documents in the case were altered. Samoa frowned. That's impossible. The witness list was changed, Aisha said. Names were added later. The room suddenly felt heavier. Samoa leaned back slightly in his chair. That doesn't make sense, he muttered. Aisha opened another document on her phone and slid it across the table. These are the original court records Connor secretly kept copies of. Samoa stared at the screen. His eyes moved slowly down the list of names. Then he compared it with the names he had memorized during his revenge. His breathing slowed. Something was wrong. 2 of the victims he had poisoned were not on the original list. They had never testified in court. They had never spoken in defense of Victor Balogun. They had never even been connected to the accident. Samoa's hand trembled slightly as he lowered the phone. For weeks he had believed his actions were justice. Painful justice. But justice nonetheless. Now doubt crept into his mind like a slow-moving shadow. If that's true, he whispered. His voice sounded weaker than before. Then I killed people who had nothing to do with my brother's death. A heavy silence filled the small room. Somewhere down the hallway, a metal door slammed shut. Samoa lowered his head and stared at the table. The anger that had once fueled his revenge now felt hollow. Slowly, he clenched his fist. Victor Balogun used me, he said bitterly. Aisha looked at him carefully. Samoa's eyes slowly lifted again. He knew I would come for the witnesses, Samoa continued quietly. He knew I would spend years searching for them. His voice hardened. And he let it happen. Samoa leaned forward slightly, his eyes dark now with a new kind of realization. He changed the records, so that when I came looking for revenge, his jaw tightened. I would destroy innocent people instead of him. That evening, Aisha returned to her small apartment in Lagos with a mind that refused to rest. The conversation with Samoa kept replaying in her head. If what Connor had revealed was true, then Samoa's revenge had been built on a lie. And someone had carefully designed that lie. Aisha placed her bag on the table and immediately opened her laptop. The soft glow of the screen lit up the dim room as she logged into the public court archive database. For the next several hours, she searched through thousands of pages of legal records. Case files. Witness statements. Police reports. At first, everything looked normal. But then she noticed something strange. Some documents had been modified years after the trial ended. That wasn't supposed to happen. Court records were meant to remain untouched once a case was closed. Aisha opened the file history. Her heart began beating faster. Several witness statements had been edited. Dates had changed. Names had been added. Entire paragraphs had disappeared from official records. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. The deeper Aisha dug into the archives, the clearer the truth became. Victor Balogun had spent years quietly erasing evidence. Witness statements had been rewritten. Police reports had been altered. Entire documents had vanished from the system as if they had never existed. Someone with power inside the legal system had helped him do it. And Samoa's revenge had been carefully manipulated from the beginning. Victor Balogun had known exactly what Samoa would do once he discovered the names of the witnesses who helped him escape prison. But instead of hiding from Samoa, Victor had changed the witness list. He replaced real witnesses with innocent people. People who had nothing to do with the accident. People who would become easy targets for a grieving brother seeking revenge. And while Samoa haunted those names one by one, Victor Balogun watched safely from the shadows. Protected. Untouched. Aisha leaned back in her chair, stunned by the cruelty of it. Samoa believed he was delivering justice. But in reality, he had been turned into a weapon. A weapon aimed at the wrong people. Just as Aisha finished copying the last piece of evidence onto her laptop, her phone vibrated on the table. A news alert flashed across the screen. A former police officer connected to the old accident investigation had gone missing overnight. Aisha felt a cold sensation crawl down her spine. Within hours, another message appeared in an online news forum. A retired court clerk who had once worked on the same case had suddenly left Lagos without explanation. He refused to speak to reporters. He refused to answer calls. It was as if he had vanished. Aisha slowly realized what was happening. Someone was cleaning up loose ends. Anyone connected to the original accident was either disappearing or becoming too afraid to talk. Which meant only one thing. Victor Balogun knew someone was investigating again. And now that someone was Aisha. She stared at the evidence on her screen. Every instinct told her to stop. But another voice inside her mind whispered something stronger. If she stopped now, the truth would stay buried forever. Aisha took a deep breath and continued walking. But before we go further into this mystery, tell me something. If you discovered a powerful man had manipulated the law and caused innocent people to die, would you keep investigating? Or would you walk away to save your own life? Let me know in the comments. Because Aisha was about to discover just how dangerous the truth could be. 2 nights later, the city of Lagos was unusually quiet. Heavy rain clouds hung low above the skyline, and distant thunder roared across the dark streets. Inside her apartment, Aisha Bello sat alone at her desk, staring at the glowing screen of her laptop. For days she had been searching through hidden financial records and court archives. Now, finally, she had found it. The last missing piece. A financial transfer record. The payment was dated just 2 weeks after the original hit-and-run trial that had killed Samoa's younger brother. The amount was enormous. Millions of naira. And the sender's name was unmistakable. Dr. Victor Balogun. The money had been transferred directly to a senior court official who had worked closely on the case. Aisha felt her pulse quicken. This was the proof. The proof that Victor Balogun had bribed someone inside the legal system. The proof that the witness list had been manipulated. The proof that innocent people had died because Samoa had been chasing a lie carefully created by a powerful man. Samoa had believed he was delivering justice. But Victor Balogun had turned him into a weapon. A weapon aimed at the wrong people. Without wasting another second, Aisha sent the files to her editor. Within hours, the story exploded across Lagos. Every major news channel carried the headline. New evidence exposes corruption in Victor Balogun case. The public reaction was immediate. Protests began forming outside government buildings. People demanded answers. Investigators reopened the case. And this time, the evidence was impossible to ignore. Within 48 hours, police officers arrived at Victor Balogun's luxurious mansion. The same man who had once walked confidently out of court years ago was now placed in handcuffs. Cameras flashed as reporters shouted questions. For the first time since the accident, Victor Balogun looked afraid. Days later, Aisha visited Kirikiri prison one final time. Samoa Adeyemi sat across from her in the same interview room. But this time, his expression was different. He had already seen the news. Victor Balogun had been arrested. Samoa stared quietly at the table. "My brother deserved justice," he said softly. Aisha nodded. "He's finally going to get it." Samoa closed his eyes for a moment. But when he opened them again, there was sadness in them. Too many innocent people paid the price first. Neither of them spoke for a while, because both of them knew that truth would never change. Justice had finally arrived. But it had arrived far too late. As Aisha walked out of the prison building, the sky above Lagos was beginning to clear. For the first time in weeks, sunlight broke through the clouds. The story of the poison revenge was finally over. But the lesson it left behind would remain much longer. Because sometimes the most dangerous criminals are not the ones hiding in darkness. They are the ones who know how to hide behind the law itself. If this story shocked you, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more dark mystery stories from around the world. And tell me in the comments. Do you think Samoa was a villain, or a man manipulated by a corrupt system?